Hey guys, this is a segment from Fox 2 Local News over in Detroit, Michigan. I just saw this the other day and I figured it would be interesting to do a video on this one. Now, they'll be giving their perspectives on both Trump's wiretapping accusations against Obama and the Vault 7 WikiLeaks. Now, before we get started, I want to take a moment to give a massive thank you to Meowbrains over on Patreon for being my very first patron with an incredibly generous $10 donation. It is huge for me to be receiving any kind of support like this, not just in terms of money or anything like that, but to receive support as a content creator here on YouTube. It really means a lot to me. And the same thing goes for all of my regular viewers, all the new subscribers I've gained recently. Seriously, thank all of you guys. So, back to the video. In this segment, we have two special guests. The first of which is this man, Bill Kowalski. He spent 25 years in the FBI, from 1983 to 2008. Now, I don't know his political affiliation. However, I get the feeling that there's a reason he retired from the FBI at the beginning of Obama's first term.
Bill, look, you work in the FBI. You know how these things are done. Now, you know when certain access is granted by the courts. Do you really believe that President Barack Obama had Donald Trump's phones tapped at Trump Tower?
I do not believe that President Obama did, but let's talk a minute about how the FISA process works.
This is a completely fair statement to make, because while Trump may very well have been wiretapped by the FBI, there is no information to suggest that Barack Obama would have been behind it. Now, this isn't to discredit the idea that power may have been abused to spy on Trump, because when you ask the question, who does the FBI report to, the answer to that is the U.S. Attorney General, who at the time was Loretta Lynch, someone who, quite infamously, in the face of all of the evidence that a crime had been committed, still refused to do her job and bring charges against Hillary Clinton for the whole email situation. So there very well may be something to this, but blaming Obama is not the correct course of action.
Because this was, by all accounts, this was a counterintelligence probe where some technical surveillance was being conducted, and whether it involved Trump Tower or associates of President Trump, something like that here too. But
what you've just said is completely false. This was not a counterintelligence probe, and none of the information suggests that there was any correspondence between Russia and Trump when this FISA probe was granted. And I'll get into the specifics of the request in just a moment. But you are right when you say that there was technical surveillance, the extent of which is currently unknown and the basis for which is dubious at best. This is the exact sort of thing that people have been afraid of since the Patriot Act was passed. But I'm sure you'll want to reassure people that everything about this was completely justified. You know, of course they had probable cause, but just didn't find anything, right?
I think reasonable people would believe that when the FBI or the NSA or anybody targets, an agent of a foreign power is required to get the application and to establish the probable cause for such technical surveillance.
Look, Bill, I find it kind of insidious for you to sit there as an ex-FBI agent and tell people what you consider to be a reasonable thing to think regarding the Bureau. And in a perfect world where the FBI doesn't have the history that it currently does, yes, I'm sure that any reasonable person would imagine something like that, but this is real life. Now, as far as this whole thing with Trump goes, what you've just described is in no way what happened. The FISA request was granted due to a string of communication between Russia's Alpha Bank and one of the Trump Organization's servers. From sometime in the spring of 2016 up to presumably October, the FBI noticed around 2,700 lookup messages originating from two servers belonging to Alpha Bank, which were directed at a server connected to the Trump Organization. This apparently was the basis for allowing the FISA request. Now, I'm sure to some people this might sound suspicious, but it just simply isn't, and I'll explain why I called this dubious earlier. I don't exactly know what they mean when they say lookup messages, but as a programmer myself, I have a pretty good idea of what they're probably talking about. You see, when you connect to the internet, or more specifically when you go to a page in your web browser, several things happen behind the scenes. One of those things is that your browser needs to make a request to something called a DNS server to look up the website you're trying to go to. We all know websites by an easy to remember name, something like google.com for example. For your computer, that name is meaningless. What it needs to connect to Google is the IP address associated with that URL, and this is where the DNS server comes in. When you try to go to a page, your browser sends that address to the DNS server, and the DNS server sends back what's called an A-name record, and that record contains the IP address for the server you're trying to connect to. This is what's called a DNS lookup, and when they say lookup messages, this is most likely what they're referring to. Alpha Bank is a company with over 15,000 employees. If, say, 540 of those employees were to go to the Trump Organization website 5 times over the course of 7 to 9 months, that would easily account for the 2,700 lookup messages that the FBI thought were so important that they needed to conduct surveillance on a presidential candidate or his organization. So, with what I've just told you, it should come as absolutely no surprise that when the FBI concluded their investigation, they came to the conclusion that it was probably something innocuous.
When the FBI or the NSA or anybody targets, it's an agent of a foreign power is required to get the application and to establish the probable cause for such technical surveillance.
Yeah, apparently not, Bill. Apparently with this thing with Trump, all the FBI needs is for someone to go to the wrong website too many times, and they can get a grant to do all the technical surveillance they want on anyone, apparently. So don't sit there and go, oh, well, this is what a reasonable person would believe, when the facts clearly contradict what you have to say about this.
So if I'm the Russians or any other country and I'm hitting a server or engaging in conversations or collecting intelligence, that's what their task is. But when the FBI finds out about that, they have to find a means to gain their intelligence and find out how they're
So you're
doing
saying that the FBI may have been looking at possible Russian collusion, taping and tracking the Russians, and then when somebody from the Trump administration called, as Michael Flynn did, that's how Flynn got on the tapes with the Russians.
Based on my experience, that's what it would be. That you have.
Oh my God. This really pissed me off to no end. What tape with the Russians? Huel Perkins, why are you doing this? This has absolutely nothing to do with any information that we have about this right now. Seriously, it is like no one on this panel did any research on this topic before they decided to go on television and talk about it. And just to clarify, right? This segment was done about a week after Trump accused Obama of having wiretapped him. Everyone on this panel had plenty of time to have researched the situation and provide accurate accounts of the events and present their opinions on the facts. But instead we get this. The reason I wanted to do this was because of how much people trust their local news. I think that a lot of people believe that regardless of what the big name corporate media does, their local news is unbiased and as factual as they can be. But here you have Huel Perkins, a very well-respected local news host and two-time Emmy Award-winning investigative journalist, actively participating in the spread of misinformation. Journalism at its finest.
I got no more use for this guy.
Okay, so this guy here is Bobby McKenzie. He's a former CIA agent of about 15 years who apparently ran for the Michigan House of Representatives right out of the CIA. I don't know exactly when he left, but it appears to have been around 2012 or 2013, so there's every possibility that he could be familiar with the information in the Vault 7 leaks. Now, let's see if he has anything of interest to say about it.
Bobby, you work for the CIA. I know you can't tell us everything you did, but what is the CIA doing? And is indeed what they're doing helpful to the country? Or do you have possibly rogue agents, rogue third-party people who are angry and who are releasing this information because Trump is right that these WikiLeaks documents are damaging to national security?
Am I the only person who finds it suspicious that the CIA is giving this kind of information to private contractors? Now, don't get me wrong, I know that a lot of government activities normally include talent from the private sector, but what possible role could a contractor have that gives them access to this information? And where do these people come from in the first place?
Yeah, I mean, there's a couple of points here to disentangle. The first is, yes, we need to get to the bottom of who released this information. We don't know yet. As we learned in the fall, it was the Russians that had given WikiLeaks information.
No. Stop right there. That is just something that was said. There was never a shred of evidence provided for it. And just like you would assume they would, Russia denied having any part in this. You can't just go around saying that Russia is the big bad boogeyman of the West without any proof, okay?
These were the emails from between John Podesta and other members of Hillary Clinton's campaign. In this instance, it could be someone inside the CIA. It could be a contractor. We don't know yet, but we absolutely must find out.
And this is why you don't fill your secret club with people who aren't part of the club. Not that I'm trying to tell you how to spy on people better or anything, but you guys collected a lot of information about a lot of people that certainly shouldn't be brought out to the public. So maybe, just maybe, hear me out on this one, it would be a good idea to have as few people have access to the information as possible. Just gonna throw that out there.
In terms of what is the CIA doing, they are not spying domestically. This is not their mandate.
Bullshit. I know that's kind of the FBI's job, but if you're going to say that as a broad statement, then complete bullshit. Our greatest threat of terrorism comes from within the country. So if you guys are involved in counterterrorism, even if I were to make the assumption that you guys were spying on potential terrorists and no one else, to claim that they're not doing domestic surveillance is nearly impossible to believe.
What this potentially does...
But in the course of tracking foreign agents, you may encounter Americans who are in contact with these foreign agents.
Sure, but they cannot collect information on these Americans without a court order. It doesn't work that way.
So then don't lie about it. Court order or not, you are spying domestically. Just say that you're doing it and you're doing it legally, but don't fucking lie about it.
But what these WikiLeaks do is it weakens our capacity to go after ISIS, because ISIS wasn't fully aware of our capabilities. It weakens our ability to go after Al-Qaeda and other affiliated groups.
No, it doesn't. Do not fall for idiotic statements like this. The only way these leaks could possibly weaken our ability to fight ISIS and Al-Qaeda is if these groups were filled with CISSPs who are good at what they do, but inept enough to not fix vulnerabilities that are just publicly available exploits. We are fighting against religious extremists, not Silicon Valley.
And so what has just happened here is without question a real detriment to our national security and our ability to both monitor and also stop terrorist activities from happening overseas and here on the homeland.
Really? Because that's not what you said literally this past August when you were complaining that the security of places like Facebook and Yahoo were too strong for you guys to hack into. What did you guys call it? Going dark? And listen, I know this is from the FBI, but what you need to understand is that the FBI and CIA are two sides of the same coin. The FBI handles affairs within the country, the CIA handles affairs outside of the country. They essentially have the same resources, but different legal limitations. You can basically look at them as being equal and opposite to some degree. So back when the FBI was having trouble getting into the San Bernardino shooter's iPhone, that means that the CIA was equally as powerless in the situation, otherwise they just would have. And listen, don't let the information in these Vault 7 leaks fool you for a second. Neither the FBI nor the CIA have these all-powerful surveillance machines.
Now, I don't want to believe that anybody who is a sworn citizen and dedicated servant in the CIA is responsible for this. But frankly, Rocky, there are too many third-party contractors who are working for federal agencies in sensitive areas. Ed Snowden was a contractor. And somehow, some way, this information is getting out.
Which is why you don't let these contractors buy out the government and then fix themselves into our intelligence agencies. I have no doubt in my mind that these contractors they're referring to are the same people who are embedded with the military and are lining their pockets with billions of taxpayer dollars even at this very moment. So don't you dare let these people put their hands in everyone else's business and then decide you want to complain about the consequences.
That's absolutely correct. The Wall Street Journal today wrote an editorial and an an article that talked about 1/3 of the CIA staff is contractors. But a lot of these contractors, Huel, they come from the military ranks. They come from the special operations or from the ground troops, and they've already passed the same type of security clearances that the CIA analysts or CIA individuals have to pass.
And this right here is how I know that these people are exactly who I say they are. These people are the reason why the military budget is as massively inflated as it is. This man here is Rocky Rakowski, a man who used to be a member of the Michigan House of Representatives. He's not going to get very much speaking time during this program, which is likely due to him being the only person here with a contrarian perspective on things. But pay attention to this man, because as you might have guessed, he'll bring up a couple of good points.
We also have this problem. President Donald Trump seems to have an adversarial relationship with the intelligence community. He came in with a chip on his shoulder, and apparently that's leading to problems. If indeed Trump makes the allegation that Obama has tapped his phones in Trump Tower, why doesn't he simply ask the director of the FBI, James Comey, did you do it? You don't have to wait for him to testify. Simply ask him. As the president, does not he have access to that information?
No, he doesn't. And even if he did, James Comey would not be the person to ask. The people who do, or at least did, have access to this information and the right to disclose it would have been Loretta Lynch or the person who currently does, Jeff Sessions. You know, contrary to popular belief, the FBI does not answer to the president, it answers to the U.S. Attorney General.
Well, the president obviously knew.
Doesn't he know?
Well, he obviously found out that he was tapped.
And yet James Comey has apparently gone to the Justice Department to say, no, it didn't happen.
Yeah, but the Department of Justice, you're telling me that Loretta Lynch did not talk to President Obama somehow?
Jeff Sessions is there right now. He has the information right before him. It would seem to be true.
Absolutely, and it's going to all come out.
Okay. And right there, where have we seen that before? He throws out a red herring and drops it and moves on as soon as it gets called out. Anyways, no. It's not fair to say that Jeff Sessions has the information. He theoretically has access to the information, but there's no telling exactly how long it'll take for him to obtain it if it's even possible. But in my mind, this situation creates a whole new facet to Trump making Sessions the Attorney General. Initially, I was put off by it. I mean, it seemed like a very strange choice for Trump to want Sessions. However, with everything that's going on at the moment, I think this begins to shed a little light on the situation.
Charlie, but the problem, here's the problem here. This is a perception right here that our government is spying on people. Now, maybe they do for a reason, and there's a legal process to spy, whether it's the CIA out of this country or if FBI here.
Charlie Langston is absolutely right. And I actually do appreciate him trying to take a reasoned position rather than blowing smoke when he doesn't have all the information about the topic. Again, I do have to bring up how flimsy the circumstances were for the FBI being granted this FISA warrant. But he doesn't really seem to be trying to justify their actions as much as he's making the statement that there is a legal process that was followed. Despite my disagreement with the grounds for the warrant being granted, he is absolutely right in saying that the process was in fact followed.
But the bottom line here is when a president tweets out that a former president is spying on Trump Tower, the country goes wild. That's not responsible.
Oh my God. Is that a valid criticism of Donald Trump? Does that mean I can finally stop defending the man? God, I never thought I'd see the day. You know, this is the kind of thing that people should actually be criticizing Trump for here, because it is incredibly counterproductive to have tweeted about this. Even if his words were 100% true that Obama was spying on him during his campaign, okay, fine. You need to follow the process and then get charges on the people who abuse their power. Then you can talk about it publicly. But before that happens, you publicizing this puts the offending parties on red alert. It's like telling someone you're going to rob them if they leave their doors unlocked, then expecting them to leave their doors unlocked. Plus, when Trump makes statements like this without first having some concrete proof of wrongdoing, it really destroys his credibility, which I guess there's nothing really lost since nobody gave Trump any credibility to begin with, so...
We just got done saying there's a legal way to do things, a good way of doing things. We want to have the intelligence, but you can't go out and excite nearly a riot.
How about that?
And
I also want to go back to something I said.
In this position,
that where there's smoke, there's Russian fire. And look, the timing on this stuff is questionable. Just like Trump was helped out so much by the WikiLeaks during the campaign with the Clinton emails.
What are you talking about, you crazy person? You know, this is one of the things that's really been fake news that really pissed me off, because it's just so easily debunked. WikiLeaks released the first batch of Clinton emails on March 16th. Trump became the GOP nominee on June 7th. The email leaks could not have conceivably been done to favor Trump. If you wanted to criticize them in any way, you would say that they were released to help Bernie. Lansing, why do you keep electing this man as your mayor?
Now here it is. He makes this wild accusation against President Obama, which is insane and ridiculous.
Well, no, it isn't. There's evidence to suggest that he was being spied upon, and the only real mistakes of his were A, tweeting it out, and B, naming the person who isn't in charge of the FBI. But there's nothing insane about the claim that the government in general might have been spying on him. Stop being so partisan. Jesus. We know for a fact that the FBI had a warrant that would allow them to spy on Trump's organization.
And then there's this distractive. Then there's these WikiLeaks, which lead people to believe just one second, Rocky. It leads people to believe that, oh well, the CIA is doing this. Gosh, I guess there's spying going on all the time. So maybe Obama did do this.
Why were there 3 FISA warrants? The first one rejected, the second one rejected, and finally a third one, more narrowly drafted. And basically, they judge shopped to get a FISA warrant accepted through a judge to actually tap the tower. Who explained that?
Who's they?
The administration. The Department of Justice. The Department of Justice had to do it to authorize the FBI.
This right here, Rocky, this is the $1 million question. This is where this whole debate about Trump's accusations should have started, rather than circling around for the first 11 minutes and treating the situation as though there isn't a shred of validity to what Trump said. This isn't a question that I think either of us could answer on our own, but Rocky has come to the same conclusion I have. Something fishy was definitely happening, but placing the blame on Obama was just Trump barking up the wrong tree. But before this video ends, I'll just let our former FBI friend here explain from his own experience why Trump's concerns are valid.
That would have been predicated by the FBI if you did that here too. And again, I'll come back to there's a foreign agent element there too. But I wanted to correct something here too. Everybody's under the assumption that Director Comey wanted somebody to come out and say this didn't happen. What Director Comey actually said is that he wanted the judge to say that President Trump was not a target.
For the sake of objectivity, I will leave this statement to your own interpretation. But for me, I see this as being a very pertinent piece of information. What I will say is that if we take this into account, then what Comey would like for us to believe is that the FBI obtained a FISA warrant to do surveillance on the full extent of communication between a Russian entity and the Trump Organization, and for some reason, Donald Trump, the man who was at the time trying to become president of the United States, simply wasn't a target. If he expected people to believe that, then the only conclusions you could draw from it are that the FBI is either woefully inept, which based on their history is entirely possible, or that he is full of shit.
Because there's a method that you do. If in fact, let's assume for a minute that they were targeting a foreign agent who was using a server or a phone or anything like that, Director Comey can't come out and say who we were targeting, how we learned about it, what techniques we're using, because those are sophisticated techniques.
Exactly. And this is why expecting Comey to have presented any useful information about this topic from the start was idiotic. And thank you for explaining why the last 10 minutes of this program were just misleading to the viewers in your local area and a waste of their time. Now, would anyone else like to pick apart the narrative before we end?
Those are sophisticated techniques.
And he will on the 20th.
I know people, I know stuff, but I can't tell you because it may compromise us.
And he can certainly tell his boss, Donald Trump.
Well, all right. And that may have happened by now.
It should have happened by now. All right, panel, we thank you for your comments and your insights.
I have been authorized by the Department of Justice to confirm that the FBI, as part of our counterintelligence mission, is investigating the Russian government's efforts to interfere in the 2016 presidential election. And that includes investigating the nature of any links between individuals associated with the Trump campaign and the Russian government, and whether there was any coordination between the campaign and Russia's efforts.
How about that?